Good evening, I'm Belva Davis, and welcome to This Week in Northern California. Joining me on our news panel, Jill Tucker, staff writer for the San Francisco Chronicle on the Race to the Top competition for education. Paul Rogers, environment writer with the San Jose Mercury News, with some sobering news for supporters of Proposition 23. And starting with Josh Richman, legal and political affairs reporter for the Oakland Tribune. So Josh, tell us, just how close is this U.S. Senate race between Boxer and Fiorina?
Well, we had some new polling numbers come out this week, and if you average those in with the others that came out over the past month, you've got about a 4.4 percentage point lead for Barbara Boxer. And if you factor in the margins of error that those polls have, that's not much of a lead really at all. But it's early. We still have a lot of time before Election Day. Barbara Boxer and Carly Fiorina are both busily out there campaigning all over the state. The National Republican Senatorial Committee bought up a big block of airtime for those last few days before Election Day in November. To blanket the LA media market with pro-Fiorina, anti-Boxer ads. So there's going to be a lot of spending in those last few days on both sides of the aisle. But the battling remains relatively superficial in some regards. You had this week Carly Fiorina's camp pushing the story that Boxer had sort of equated political service to military service, which she actually really didn't. You had the Democrats pushing the fact that the National Organization for Marriage, which had helped pass Prop 8 here a couple of years ago, is helping to fund an independent expenditure committee that's supporting Carly Fiorina. So it's that sort of fighting that's going on. If you turn to some of the issues, though, there's some interesting things happening.
You spend all your time fact-checking? Is that what you do?
Well, yeah, I'll tell you something. With the volume of ads that are coming out in all of these races, it is difficult to keep up. There are a lot of claims, some of them fairly wild claims that fairly, leap off the screen at you, and you say, no, that's not right. You can pretty verifiably say, I'm not saying in this race in particular, but in general. But yeah, I think there is a lot of fact-checking to be done in a lot of these races. Over in the governor's race, it's an even tighter race, actually. If you average the month's polls, you're at a 1.3% lead for Jerry Brown, which is within the margin of error, so it's basically a dead heat at the moment. And those ads are going strong as well.
So, Josh, what voters then, given the polling and how close they are, what voters are up for grabs for these guys, and what issues are they really hammering home? Because I've got to think it's independent voters, and it's maybe they're trying to grab a share of the Hispanic voters.
Indeed. Independent voters are the key in California. Republicans simply cannot win with just Republican voters. They have to attract some middle-of-the-road independent voters and even some crossover Democrats. The problem with that is that the messages, at least I've heard some people say, that the messages that Carly Fiorina and Meg Whitman are putting forth are not exactly where independent voters are on some of these issues. For instance, Carly Fiorina has basically supported Arizona's immigration law as it stands. Barbara Boxer does not. Independent voters, a little bit split on that, probably not going in the right direction for Fiorina, though. On the environment, as we're going to talk about with Paul in a couple of minutes, voters take global warming and climate change rather seriously, apparently, according to the Public Policy Institute of California this week. Carly Fiorina ran an ad last month saying that Barbara Boxer is foolish to be worried about the weather, on that issue. So that's not exactly there. And in terms of something like offshore drilling, same thing. Californians have taken a sharp turn against offshore drilling recently, and that's something that you're going to see cutting in over the next couple of
Are either of these candidates trying to define themselves on TV or just throwing lobs at each other?
At the moment, they're still sort of, throwing the grenades. It's a long time till we see any of these people get on the debating stage. And that was a subject of contention this week as well. Meg Whitman announced that she will debate Jerry Brown 3 times this fall. And Jerry Brown said, oh, well, that's nice. I asked last month for 10 debates. So where are you? And he's still wondering, he's still putting out press releases asking why she's not coming to an event here in San Francisco this weekend. On the senatorial race, there was an announcement today of a debate. It turns out that that's still being negotiated. Still working that out, but it's not going to happen until September at the earliest anyway. So we got a lot of time for rhetoric before we get down to any brass tacks, it seems.
It does seem a long way off, but actually absentee voting in California begins in 65 days from today. And it seems to me that both Fiorina and Whitman have real mathematical problems, basically. And the problem is that for them, California is a blue state. Obama won by 25%. It was the largest presidential victory since FDR. And there's three key numbers in California: 7, 5, and 3. There's 7 million registered Democrats, 5 million registered Republicans, and 3 million declined to state voters. So Jerry Brown and Barbara Boxer start 2 million votes ahead of the other two. And if you do the basic back of the envelope math, they have to win 2/3 of those independent voters, many of whom are women and who are younger people. And they're on the opposite sides, as you point out. So the question is, how do they overcome that math? I mean, it's like, what is the route to 51?
Well, I think the Republicans are counting on a couple of things. They're counting on a very strong anti-incumbent sentiment that seems to be developing. It remains to be seen how strong that's going to be by the time voting starts, because the latest polling, for instance, on health care reform shows people are more satisfied with it now than they ever have been before. So that some of that anger may be draining away even as the Republicans bank on it. But they're also counting on, other than anti-incumbent sentiment, they're counting on money to some extent. You saw what Meg Whitman did in the primary. She is going to dump in a tremendous amount of money into this race over the next couple of months. They really want to blitzkrieg the airwaves with message and get out there in front of it as much as they possibly can.
Is voter fatigue playing into this at all? Because it seems like a lot of the election is happening in a sandbox with your hair's ugly, your boat's really big. And I wonder, are they really thinking about what those ads are going to say so that they don't alienate the voters?
If you're tired of it now, you better move to New Mexico, because it's only going to get a lot worse before we're done. This is in election cycles past, this would be the downtime. This is obviously not a downtime this year. It's going to be hard fought for every inch of territory all through the summer. Come Labor Day, you're going to start seeing those advertising budgets ramping up and taking off like airplanes. And you will not be able to turn on a TV or a radio this fall without hearing an ad for one of these four major party candidates.
Well, one big issue in California always is the environment, and of course that's why Mr. Paul Rogers is here tonight. If you're an environmentalist, though, you were happy with a poll this week that said that Proposition 23 was not doing well. First, tell us what it is and why it's not.
Well, there are a lot of propositions on the ballot coming up, and the numbers haven't quite sunk in with everybody just yet. But there's an easy way to remember Proposition 23. It's actually an anagram, right? Proposition 23 would overturn AB 32, right? 23, 32, mirror image. So what is AB 32? Some folks might remember in 2006, the legislature passed and Governor Schwarzenegger signed the nation's furthest reaching state global warming law. And this law, which the state is now writing the regulations for and which takes effect in 2012, would require that California emit the same amount of greenhouse gases by 2020 that it emitted in 1990. And that's a drop of about 15% from current levels. It's basically going to really hit oil refineries, people who burn a lot of fossil fuels, cement kilns, power plants. So those industries are fighting it. So two big Texas oil companies, Valero and Tesoro, bankrolled the signature gathering to put Prop 23 on the ballot, which would suspend AB 32 until California's unemployment rate gets below 5.5% or below for 4 consecutive quarters.
And where is it now?
Oh, it's at 13, and it's only happened 3 times in the last 20 years. This low of an unemployment rate. Meg Whitman has suggested that we need to suspend AB 32 for a year. Jerry Brown yesterday at a meeting of the editorial board of the Mercury News said absolutely not. These laws create jobs, they don't destroy jobs. It's a fundamental public policy difference between the two candidates. Do you believe that environmental laws take away jobs, which the opponents of AB 32 argue? Do you believe they create jobs, which the supporters of AB 32 argue? And the poll that you're citing, the PPIC poll this week, found 2/3 of Californians support AB 32. And that tracks with a poll, the field poll that came out July 9th, that had Proposition 23 to stop AB 32. It had Prop 23 at only 36%. It's going to be very difficult to start at 36% and get above 50, particularly when you have Silicon Valley putting in a lot of money to preserve AB 32.
Well, one of the things that you said right off the bat was that this was bankrolled by some of these oil giants, and I have to think that when people think of oil giants right now, they're thinking of a big oil spill in the Gulf, and we'll tie that, what's happening there with BP, to this thing bankrolled by their siblings.
Fairly or not, there are some pretty easy ads to demagogue. I mean, you know, the ad with wind turbines, rows and rows of solar and birds covered with oil. You know, Californians leading the way on clean jobs, but now Texas oil companies. You can just see this with the oil coming down on the screen. And the people who are trying to keep AB 32 are not, you know, a few Sierra Clubbers and Birkenstocks. I mean, this is Google, this is Applied Materials, this is eBay, as a matter of fact.
The Bay Area Council is very solidly behind it
Yes.
as well, and that's all the region's largest employers.
Well, all the renewable energy
Silicon Valley
industry.
Leadership Group, PG&E, you know, and I think what's Arnold Schwarzenegger, George Shultz, who was Ronald Reagan's secretary. So, you know, 2 out of 3 ballot measures fail anyway, historically. And when you start below 36, it's really difficult. So, you know, I think the people who are bankrolling Prop 23 had a really a cold wake-up call this month. And so what they've done, the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, one of the supporters of it, which believes it will cost jobs, filed a lawsuit this week to change the ballot language, claiming that Jerry Brown, as Attorney General, wrote loaded ballot language which is not accurate and is biased. So it seems to me that if they felt from their own internal polling they were winning, they wouldn't be trying to rewrite the language
Well,
at
the
this late hour.
lawsuits to modify ballot pamphlet language aren't uncommon these days either.
That's
so,
right.
Yeah.
That's right. But I thought that was a very telling stratagem in this. And the question is, we've just watched PG&E burn up $46 million in the last election on Prop 16. The opponents had $100,000 and lost. I mean, the PG&E lost $46 million to $100,000.
And No on 23 got $5 million this week.
That's right. And No on 23 already has more money than the yes. So if you're the oil companies, you're going, what do we do now?
That's what I was going to ask. It's not going to be a race for the money.
Right.
There is money available on both sides of this issue.
A lot of money. Yeah.
And so what, in essence, will voters have in terms of evidence of who's right about job creation and who's not? Who's got the good numbers?
That's a great question, and there have already been a whole lot of dueling studies that come out. Some studies show that it'll create jobs, some studies show it'll take away jobs. There's some state studies sort of in the middle. It depends what kind of assumptions you plug in. And I think as we get closer to the election, you're going to see lots of stories sort of picking apart these individual studies, showing you, oh, well, you know, this one didn't mention that if it's cheaper to buy solar panels, that people's electricity bills will go down, even though maybe their gasoline bills go up. Or their, you know, so there's a lot of factors like that. And economists are battling right now over this exact question.
Well, who is supporting outside of the Texas oil man?
Yeah.
Proposition 23.
Right now, the California Manufacturing and Technology Association, the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, Congressman Tom McClintock, the Republican Party, the Black Chamber of Commerce.
We did not get to the electric car. Lots of excitement, convention.
The Reader's Digest version is there was a big convention of plug-in electric vehicles in San Jose this week, and the 2 hot new cars that are coming out in December are the Nissan Leaf, which is an all-electric car, $20,000 after tax credits. You plug it in, goes 100 miles. You can drive in the carpool lane with it. I think it's going to be the next Prius. And the Chevy Volt, which is a car coming out of GM. It's a plug-in hybrid. It will go 40 miles only on batteries, and then 340 with the gasoline. So, you know, people have been talking about electric cars and stops and starts for a long time, and you're finally going to have 2 mass-produced models available by the end of the year. It's a really interesting
Does the
time.
General Motors car have a chance in the competitive world it's
I
going to
think
land
it does. The one problem is it's a little more expensive. It's $41,000. When you take the tax credits in, it's $33,000. So it's, you know, 33 versus 20 for the Leaf, but it goes further than the Leaf on, you know, a full tank.
Well, dollars is what it's all about in education, because California very much failed at its last attempt to get federal dollars to support the education system here. Jill, it was a different story this time. What did the state do differently?
Well, the state is, as we said before, in the running for Race to the Top funds. They last time around were eligible for about $700 million. They weren't even a finalist. They weren't even close. It was such a dismal showing that the state considered not applying again in round 2. They decided to apply anyway, and they took a completely different tack this time. Last time they had all sorts of legislation that they crafted that they were forcing down on the school districts, everything from lifting the cap on the number of charter schools to linking data to teacher performance, parent empowerment laws, giving parents a right to transfer out of failing schools or change their school to a charter. They didn't get any points for a lot of those last time around. And they didn't get any points for the lack of union buy-in and other things. This time they tapped 7 school districts in the state, including San Francisco, LA, Sacramento, a few others, to draft the legislation sort of from a bottom-up approach. What those districts are already doing that other districts across the state might be able to do as well. And they also put a cover letter. Schwarzenegger wrote a cover letter on this application, and he basically said, Dear Arne Duncan, Secretary of Education for Obama, if you punish us for not having union buy-in, we will never be able to do these things that we want to do. We'll never have a chance to do these things. So if you're going to take away points from us, don't do it there, because we'll get the union buy-in at a local level, but we just don't have it in our application. And it seemed to work, because we are one of 19 finalists. Before this round, I talked to Bonnie Reese, our Secretary of Education for Schwarzenegger, and she said, she put the odds at winning a mega million lottery, multi-state lottery. And today she said, she was much more optimistic. She equated that, the odds might still be a little long to get it, but it's more like a scratch-off now, maybe, California scratch-off, that we might have a chance for this money. And I think that came as a huge shock to the people who last time thought we were completely out of the running.
Jill, what will we do with this money if we're lucky enough to get it?
Well, the reality is $700 million in California for education is not a lot of money. So again and again, Schwarzenegger and other people supporting Race to the Top have said that if we're just doing this for the money, it's not worth it. Our education budget in California is over $40 billion, so $700 million is not a lot. But what it would pay for is some things that we have never been able to get off the ground, like a data system that will be able to track students as they move from school to school, track the teachers as these kids move through, track even the college education programs where those teachers were trained to see which ones are better than the others. Is Fresno State a good teacher training program, or San Francisco State? Right now we don't know. So having that money would be key. It would also create an evaluation system, which the teachers union is not fond of, to evaluate teachers and principals based on student test scores and other types of things.
Even if they don't get the money, though, these seem like some fairly big reforms. California is one of the only states in America where the test score trends of the students in a classroom can't be used in the or couldn't before be used in the evaluation of a teacher. And now, because of California's application, they can be. Obama said, as I recall last time, we won't even take your application unless you at least have that metric to see how.
Well, we didn't have it at the state level. Districts, and there were some that did.
But as a state policy,
but as a state policy,
and now we do.
They didn't have it. They do now. Some districts were able to do it before, and they have been doing it. What it would do with this Race to the Top, it would require the districts that signed on, and there's 300 districts and county offices of education that signed on. They would be required to implement a lot of these things that are in there. So it would really, if they could get the teachers union, you still have to negotiate this stuff with the teachers union at the local level. So it's not a done deal even if we get this, but it really gives them momentum and some money to get this ball rolling in areas like differential pay, paying teachers more to work in difficult schools. Those are things that no one would even talk about 2-3 years ago, and people are really talking about them now. And I think that what Arne Duncan said was, this is releasing a torrent of reform that nobody wanted to talk about. But the reality is, out of the
nobody in the teachers union wanted
well,
to talk about
even at the local level, because
lots
if
of
you
people in the country who want to improve schools.
It's true, but if you are a Democrat you didn't want to talk about it either because
President
you
Obama
needed...
ran on it. I mean, he said, we're gonna have accountability because we care about the students more than the teachers' unions, and now he's delivering.
It's been tough to talk about it at a local level or a state level, that's for sure. And
what's the time frame on which this decision is likely to get made about how much funding and doling it out?
everybody, all the finalists have to go to Washington in early August to present their case, and we should know in September whether California gets the cash.
Oh, wow.
It's soon.
So change is on the way, provided we make it.
If we win that
If we
scratch off, we'll
off,
get this
we've got
money.
it.
Yep, yep.
All right. Well, my thanks to all of you for joining us here tonight.